Hi, everyone. Welcome once again to the Scrappy Cinema Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Ritchie, and with me today is documentary filmmaker Chris Johnson. He's here to talk about his new project called I Bid You Peace, The Rise and Fall of the Frugal Gourmet. Chris, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.
So, for those who maybe are too young or weren't even born yet, let's just get a brief review of who/what the Frugal Gourmet was.
So, the Frugal Gourmet, who was Jeff Smith, was one of the pioneers of food television. So, before the Food Network, before cable television, when people only had basically PBS to watch for educational content, um, he was one of the pioneers of teaching Americans how to cook. And so, starting in 1983, which is really when he became super national, um, he would have a weekly show on PBS where he would cook and teach people recipes and ingredients and things from around the world. He was a former Methodist minister, so the idea of just talking to people for 30 minutes straight with no editing was something he was used to. And so he was very good at it and very charismatic, and people really grew to love his show and learned a lot about cooking. And again, this is before the internet and before people knew about kind of international cuisine. So he really was somebody who was instrumental in kind of changing how Americans saw food.
And what was it about this story that drew you to it? Why did you want to tell this story?
Well, we're from the same town, actually. So I grew up here in Seattle, and Jeff Smith grew up here in Seattle as well. So when I was growing up here in the 80s and 90s, I never met him, but I knew of him because he was a local kind of celebrity. And so that's kind of what got me thinking about him 30 years later was, he was a local guy. And so that's what really kind of drew me to investigate the story more and kind of see what more was happening there.
And before you started work on the documentary, did you sort of um, already were you already familiar with sort of the rough outline of the rise and fall of Jeff Smith?
I mean, I remembered bits and pieces from the '90s here, but really, I didn't know much about what the details were. I didn't even know if everything that had been alleged was true. I thought, okay, I went into it with an open mind, like, oh, some people are saying this was just false accusations. Like, I don't know, is that true? Is that not true? I don't know. So yeah, I really went into it not knowing a whole lot, but I did know kind of the rough outline of what people were saying.
And you started working on this project and doing a lot of your research back during the pandemic, right? How did you approach that?
Yeah, so I started working on this in 2020, 2019, 2020, and the pandemic hit and I couldn't film anything. So all I could do was research. So I just um, sent tons of letters out, tried to find people's addresses and sent physical letters out, over 200 physical letters, trying to track people down. Because the story involves, going all the way from the 60s to today. So there's a lot of people kind of involved. And so it was tough tracking people down. So it was a lot of sending physical letters out and just trying to track people down over the years.
And ultimately, what you ended up with was a five-part series exploring the Frugal Gourmet, Jeff Smith. And I'm curious, how did you go about funding this project?
I used funds that I got from a previous project that I did, which I had gotten paid for. So I used that to kind of push this along. And the reason I was able to do all that was because I pretty much did most of this myself. So all the interviews, all the camera sound, all that stuff that I did to film everything, I did on my own for the most part, which was it's a one man band operation. But it was hard, it's a lot of like carrying 5 pieces of luggage around in an airport, and it's not as glamorous as I think people think filmmaking often is. But I will say one thing that's really interesting is that I love how technology has made things so much easier for documentary filmmakers. I mean, when I was in film school 20 years ago, you really couldn't do a one man band operation. It was a lot harder to do it. And now you can, shoot things on your phone, and you can really assemble things in a way where being just one person, you really can do a lot more than you used to be able to do. So there's it really makes it more accessible, right, for a lot of people to make stuff on their own, which is pretty great, pretty great.
To jump back, I just want to clarify for folks who might not be familiar, sort of the level of cultural awareness there was around the Frugal Gourmet at its peak.
Yeah, so I mean, he was huge. He was a national figure. He was seen on PBS weekly. I think over 6 million households a week tuned into his show. He was parodied on different programs and shows and things like that. He was on all the kind of news outlets and talk shows and things like that. He was a big figure, and anybody over the age of, say, 45, if you ask them, "Do you remember the Frugal Gourmet?" they probably remember who he was. So yeah, he was a big icon. Even the Beastie Boys, there's a lyric in one of the Beastie Boys songs about him. "I have more spice than the Frugal Gourmet."
The reason I bring it up is because, you're going at the end of this process. I guess from the beginning, or at some point in the edit, you're starting to realize this is at least one version of this is going to be longer than a feature film. And I'm curious, as you were making it and started to think about, okay, what am I going to do with this when I'm done? Given the prominence of the Frugal Gourmet, did you think this is something streamers are gonna want to, fight over, or get a bite of this, or how were you thinking about where the project would ultimately end up while you were in production?
I was sure that it was going to be a big thing picked up by streamers. I thought at least somebody's going to be really interested in the story in the same way that I was, and that it's not some really niche thing that only a few people are interested in. I mean, he was a huge figure. A lot of younger people might not know who he was, but the fact that there is a story there about the scandal and all of that makes it relatable, even if you didn't know who the Frugal Gourmet was. So there's kind of two ways of looking at it. Or two audiences, right? So you have kind of the um, people over the age of 45 who remember who the Frugal Gourmet was. And then you have younger people who might not know who he was, but are enticed by the kind of true crime element to this story. So I was sure that streamers would be interested in doing this, or picking it up rather.
And you finish, and how does that go?
Oh well, nobody was interested. I contacted a number of distribution companies and called in all the personal favors of people I know who know somebody who, because you know how this works. Like, a lot of any business is all about who you know, right? Especially in filmmaking. And so I called in all of those favors of, I know someone whose brother works at Netflix, and I know this person who's, whatever, works at HBO, and nothing. I mean, I got the responses I got from distribution companies all basically told me the same thing, which was, nobody knows who he is anymore. We don't see a market for this. I mean, literally, that's what
Hmm.
they told me. And I was really surprised by that, because I thought, Netflix picked up a documentary about Jimmy Savile when nobody in the U.S. knew who Jimmy Savile was. Um, or name whatever thing any streamer picks up that you think, oh, that's weird. I was really shocked at how people about how distribution companies were not really interested in this.
So ultimately, you ended up distributing it yourself, and
Oh,
the way I found out about this project was through an ad you had on Facebook, and I think it was
yes.
when you were announcing that you were making a feature length version of the project. So tell us a little bit about that decision and how you went about sort of, when you have those 5 episodes, probably in your mind that's sort of the perfect length and encapsulation of this story. So when you have to go in there and then try to cut that down to feature length, how did you approach that?
So the background about that is that initially, when I was first starting to work on this project, it was going to be a feature-length documentary film, and I could not cut it down past 4.5 hours or whatever it was, and I just couldn't cut it. So I contacted um, an editor who had edited the series Cheer on Netflix, Ted Warner, and who I didn't know. I just had seen his work and thought he was a good editor, and thought, oh, I'll reach out to this guy who edited the series I just watched on Netflix and see what he thinks. So I sent him everything, and he said, have you thought about making this an episodic um, film? Because there's just so much good stuff here. And to hear that from somebody who wasn't me, because obviously I would want to keep everything, right? As the filmmaker, it's always hard to cut down. Really made me think that, okay, there is something in making this episodic. Um, and so he and I worked together on editing it. And, you know, when we got to what is currently the 5 episode version, I am really proud of it. I think it's great. I'm a big fan of deep dives. Um, and I'm a big fan of kind of long form storytelling. But some feedback that I got once I started putting out there is people thought it was long. I really took that to heart. I thought, okay, well, I'm interested enough to watch 4.5 hours of this, but maybe not everybody is. And as filmmakers, I think we often, it's hard to get out of your head, right? You can only see it like through the way you see it. And that's not a great way to do things. So you kind of often need to like step away and think, okay, let me look at this from a perspective of somebody who really is not as invested in this story as I am. And so I realized, well, maybe cutting it down to a feature length version is possible. And let me have a go at it, because people are interested, but maybe not as interested as investing that amount of time in it. So I found it was actually a lot easier knowing that the 5 episode version exists. So because I'm not having to like destroy it and nobody ever gets to see it, it was okay kind of cutting it, because if somebody really wants the deep dive, they have that as an option, and they can know the complete story. But it was actually a lot of fun kind of cutting it down into a more streamlined version. And it's also something I wish more films and series did. I mean, I wish, you know, if there was something that I was really interested in, there was like an extended 5-part version I could watch as opposed to just a feature. Why not? Now that distribution is in a way easier,
Hmm.
we'll get back to that.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do different versions, and I think that's kind of cool. So I like that.
So once it became clear you were going to self-distribute the film, what was your strategy there?
My strategy was to do as much marketing as I could, because I really believe in this story. I believe in, um, telling telling the story in a way that hasn't really been told before, and introducing everybody to, um, Jeff and what happened, and the larger kind of societal issues that are at play here. How do we deal with somebody we admire who is accused of doing terrible things? The Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type thing here. Um, so my plan was to put as much into marketing as I could, try to just get the word out, try to create as many good kind of media assets as I could, try to sell it. I mean, you can have the greatest thing in the world, but if you're not selling it well, no one's going to care, right? So It was a lot of marketing and a lot of just trying to get things moving.
So, as I mentioned, I first found out about it through a Facebook ad. And given the demographics, given the age, that seems like a smart place to advertise this film. Uh, and then I was, let's say disappointed, not mad, but disappointed to see the comments on your post around two particular issues that we'll get into. The
Uh,
first being this idea of nostalgia and people not wanting to have anything ruin what their memory of something might be. And secondly, we'll talk about the value of independent film and how people now perceive paying for things. But let's start with that side since we're talking about distribution. You have comments on there about people wishing it was free. When will this be free? And to be clear, you're not charging a king's ransom for this film. It's $9.99 currently for the feature film version. And were you surprised by that? Did you expect a certain level of that feedback around paying for the project?
no, I didn't. It was one of the most surprising things to me that I would get so much of that feedback. But looking back at it, it kind of makes sense. I think streamers, large streaming subscription models like Netflix and Hulu and Paramount and all that, have made it so difficult for independent filmmakers because people will pay a certain amount every month and everything's included. And then when someone comes along selling their independent film as a one off, people think that has no value. Why isn't this included with my subscription? Put this on the streamers where I can watch it. And again, people have no idea how distribution for independent films works anyway, so they think you can just upload your film to Netflix and Netflix will then pay you money. And the other thing is that people are so used to being the product as well. So like, you know, showing something for free but it has ads, or selling your data but but it's free kind of thing. I don't show ads, I don't do any of that. I just, here's the thing, here's the interface that you watch it on, and that's it. I'm not showing you 30 minutes of trailers before I do it. I'm not trying to sell you a mattress at the same time. I really trust my audience in that sense. I respect my audience. They're paying their hard-earned money to buy this product that I've made that I'm very proud of. And it is astonishing to me that is seen as that is met with such contempt in many cases.
I did want to ask you if you considered physical media as a release, and whether you are considering that, or what sort of the pros and cons in 2026 of trying to put your project out on physical media.
I did consider it. Basically, a couple of reasons why I haven't done it and don't really plan to do it is, for the 5-part series, especially,
Yeah.
it would just, you'd have to put on 5 discs or 3 discs or something. It would be a lot of discs there. And in terms of shipping and storing them and all that kind of stuff, it's, given the demand, I just don't think it would be there. I don't think it would make money at all. So I think I've gotten maybe like 3 comments over the last 4 months or whatever saying, "Can I get this on a DVD?" And that's it. Like, I mean, I wish I could. I wish there was an easy way to do it, but you know, um, the thing about distribution, and I've said this before, is that in terms of the distribution part of distribution, we have that solved. Like, we have the ability for anyone in the world to watch my film or series anywhere at any time. It's solved. Like, we don't have to ship around film canisters. We're not mailing out DVDs. We're not, like, that part of distribution is the greatest it has ever been in the history of the world, a history of cinema. But that's the tricky part, is that it's so easy now and yet so much more difficult in a certain sense.
Well, I'm a huge proponent of physical media. I think that the realities of it for independent filmmakers are very challenging and more challenging by the year because obviously, you can't. What are you going to do? A run of 100? How many DVDs are you going to do? And it's just hard to do it at scale that makes sense. So,
Mm.
as much as I champion the physical media for a lot of the same reasons that you're distributing this yourself without ads and without a monthly fee. Uh, it's just not necessarily feasible for all projects to offer
Yeah.
that now to do that. And then we have this other aspect of the comments regarding the content itself and folks who grew up with the Frugal Gourmet and have a very um, let's say, rose colored glasses approach, or perhaps don't necessarily want to hear anything that ruins how they feel about it.
Sure.
Nostalgia can be a dangerous thing and a powerful thing. I could read one of these here. He doesn't have the ability to speak for himself. This is referencing Jeff Smith, who passed away several years ago. Therefore, anything you have to say is pretty much a cheap shot. Even if you find people who defend him, the man was one of the best out there in his day. We spend all this time dragging his name through the, I assume they meant mud again. Talk about his food. Talk about that legacy. The way you're going, the only legacy you're going to have is the guy who has to stir up poop. Uh, the man was legendary in the kitchen. That's all you need to talk about. So, Chris Johnson, I'll put your lower third as man who has to stir up poop.
Poopster.
And it does say poop. I just, for the folks at home, I'm not sanitizing it. It is poop stirrer. How do you navigate? If people remember things the way they want to, and they were wonderful, and how dare
Mhm.
you bring anything, that in any way fractures this incredible view of how things were and how perfect everything was.
First of all, it's nice to find something I can finally put on my tombstone, poopster. Um, but you know, it this is talked about in the series. By the way, this idea that people will compartmentalize things with someone that they really admire to separate the good from the bad, separate the artist from the art, kind of thing. So the larger societal questions about how we deal with this was something I was very much interested in when making this project. So kind of the irony of people commenting on this project by being annoyed that um, I'm not talking about the good works that he did is not lost on me. But also, I should point out that I do talk about the good works that he did. I mean, it is a 5-part series, most of which, talks about the man and his life, and the good and the bad. And if you look at there's over 200 reviews on my website now of people who've watched the series or the film, and overwhelmingly they talk about how balanced it is in that sense. And not to be all kind of both sides, but in terms of showing the good that he did and the bad that he did, I really made a point to, not make a hit piece, but also not make a puff piece. I mean, I wanted to really show, here is a person who had these two sides to him, and this is how some people saw him, and this is how other people saw him, and how do we reconcile these things? And because I think that's really interesting. If it were just, here's this man, look how awful he is, I don't think that's as interesting as, here's this man, this person says he was brilliant, and this person said he was a monster, and like, let's look at that. That's interesting to me. So people who say they just want to hear about the good, I think are just, I don't understand how you can just sit there and say that I don't care about who this person actually was. If somebody I admired would turned out to have a different side to them, I would certainly be disappointed, but I would also be interested in knowing what the truth was. People, I think, lack a certain amount of curiosity in a certain sense.
I think you bring up a good point that this is not a hit piece. You are painting a full picture of Jeff Smith's life. You're not focusing on, just everything that happened after the Frugal Gourmet ended, or just what was going on with the show and the rise to prominence with it.
Can I just add one thing really quick? Is that um, the people who accuse it of being a hit piece or stirring up poop, as that person said. I mean, the thing that just makes me laugh about that is that, let's say I discovered through the research that, like, all that it was a false accusation and he was, like, that would have made a more interesting story. And, as a filmmaker, right? Like, if it had turned out, I mean, like I said, I went in completely open to whatever the evidence was going to show, right? So, um, if it had gone one way, or it would have been probably a better, more interesting project had it been like this big conspiracy and all of that. But it didn't turn out to be that way. But yeah, it's people just I don't know. I don't know why they want to believe things that just aren't true. Because I went in very open to, I'm going to go where the evidence leads me, and go from there. And I wanted to show something that was very factual. So that's what I did. I'm still optimistic that there are people out there who have not heard about this, who would be interested if they heard about it. And I'm just hoping that will hopefully work in a way that can make some money, because what I'd like to do is use whatever money I make from doing this to do the next thing,
Right.
because I have other ideas of things I'd like to do. I really enjoy this work. I love being able to do dives into research. I love interviewing people. I've spent my career interviewing interesting people about things they do and experiences they've had. And I love that. And I want to do more of that. So, and I love working on my own. I love, like I said before, the technology allows you to do this on your own in a way you couldn't do 20 years ago. So I love that. And in a way, I kind of see myself as kind of the farmer's market, right? Like, you can go to the Safeway or the Whole Foods and get your grocery, but I'm here with my vegetable stand selling on the street. And it is disheartening when people come up and say, why isn't this at the supermarket? Like, I'm reminded of the XKCD cartoon of the, come to bed, honey. Person's at the computer and says, no, somebody's wrong on the internet. Um, because, like, people will comment, and it's hard. I don't have a thick skin. I do take it personally when someone just randomly says something mean about something I spent 6 years working on. And people will just comment like, I'm not interested. Like, okay, like, what? Like, I see ads for things all the time I'm not interested in, or I see posts about things I'm not interested in. I would never in a million years ever comment just telling them I'm not interested in that. Like, it seems needlessly mean and cruel. And I don't understand that. I really don't.
What's something that you learned in doing this project that you will take with you on whatever project you do next? What's something you're taking away from this?
How hard distribution is. I mean, it's funny. I mentioned how easy distribution is in a certain sense. I mean, the distribution part of distribution is so easy. Just put it on a website, and there you go. People can get it. The hard part is the other aspect of distribution, is like getting people to see value in your work now. I did not expect to be so hard. And that's kind of had me rethink, like, okay, what does the future look like? If it's this hard for something like this, what's the next project going to be? How tough of a sell is that going to be? I don't have answers yet. I'm curious what other filmmakers, people like yourself, like what other people think about where we're headed. That would be a good conversation to have. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but it's an interesting kind of gauge of doing this project right at this time. So, okay, so now we know this is more difficult than I expected. Like, what do we learn from that, and where do we go from here? I don't quite know yet, but I'd love to have more conversations with filmmakers about what that looks like.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you taking some time today to have this conversation with us. And again, the movie is I Bid You Peace, The Rise and Fall of the Frugal Gourmet. Filmmaker and poop stirrer Chris Johnson, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me.
You can find out more and purchase the film at ibidYouPeace.com. Until next time, everybody, stay scrappy.